We will continue now. As mentioned earlier, the first three phases of initiation consisted of study, aspiration, and leading one's life. The pursued result is the purification, discipline, and calmness of mind. And the Greek called this the catharsis, the purification, as we discussed in the during questions. From the fourth level of initiation onwards, the focus is on first-hand experience in other planes of existence, because you learn by becoming. With the Egyptians, Osiris' death and resurrection was the symbol of the process of initiation. The goal of initiation was, and still is, to transform as an earthly human being into a divine, imperishable human being by developing the inner aspects, the inner Osiris aspects in yourself, in accordance with the 7 phases of initiation. The starting point in Theosophy and ancient Egypt is man is a composite being with 7 principles of consciousness, but the simplest representation is the division in 3 parts: spirit, soul, and body. And a very important note is the following. The Teosofia teaches that those 3 parts, spirit, soul, and body, can be separated temporarily without the functioning of each one ceasing, and therefore the process of initiation is possible. We will have now a look at the so-called egg diagram, which was also presented in the series of lectures by Johanna Vermeulen on conscience, where she explained what this egg diagram was all about. And in the picture that you see now, we see at the left side of the diagram the words spirit, soul, and body. And actually the egg diagram shows that the spiritual part, the imperishable part of our composite nature, can be subdivided into 3 other parts. From bottom to top, we see the inner teacher, which is an aspect of our spirit. We see the inner Buddha, and we see at the top level the inner God, also called the monad. Then we see below that the soul, the learning part, the human soul, the growing man. As a self-conscious being, we have so far developed our thinking ability, the mind. However, also in the human soul is a latent divine core, the monad. And we see at the bottom level the body, the perishable part, and also this has a divine core, a monad. Now, which part of the human being is being initiated? It is the growing man, the human soul, which during initiation must become equal in quality to his own inner God. Man has to ennoble himself, to elevate himself until he is equal in quality to the divine core above him. He becomes in fact his own initiate. By ascending along the ray of consciousness, one's own inner God is brought to awakening, although perhaps temporarily. The initiation is a test in this respect. Under what circumstances does initiation take place? We will now outline how initiation takes place from the 3rd degree onward. According to the Teosofia, our solar system is a living organism which, like all living things, is governed by consciousness and whose body, by analogy, has a heart. All organs are interconnected by arteries, vessels and nerves, rivers of life, through which electromagnetic currents circulate, the so-called circulations of the cosmos. The human soul temporarily leaves the material body and travels through the solar system with the remaining parts of its constitution. How? By letting itself be carried along on these circulations of the cosmos to the spheres of the Moon, Venus, Mercury and the Sun. And in order to enter those different spheres successively, he has to leave parts of his constitutions in the spheres to which they belong. On the Earth, the material body; on the Moon, the garment belonging to the Moon; on Venus, the garment belonging to Venus; on Mercury, the garment belonging to Mercury. Until the Sun is reached, after which he returns by the way of the outward journey. On the way, he stops again in different spheres in order to clothe himself again in the garments belonging to those spheres, to finally return to the earth and there to clothe himself again in his body, which had remained there under the guard of his teacher. And these are the outlines of the process of initiation in a nutshell. As had been said, there are different degrees of initiation which differ from one another in character and in circumstances. Before going into the details of the differences in character, we shall say something about the difference in circumstances. The processes of initiation do not take place randomly in time and space, because this depends on the different cycles that occur in the cosmos. For instance, in each year there are 4 characteristic moments for the cycle of the Earth around the Sun, which are denoted by the 4 so-called holy seasons: the winter solstice around the 21st of December, the vernal equinox around the 21st of March, the summer solstice around the 21st of June, and the autumn equinox around September 21st. At these times, conditions are favorable regarding the circulations in the cosmos to go through the process of initiation. Each initiation has its own characteristics. In addition, in the long run, there are cycles with favorable conditions where the greatest initiation can take place. For example, when the Earth, the Moon, Venus, Mercury and the Sun are in syzygy, are in one line. The higher the initiation, the more the need for those special conditions. The position of the Moon is also important. Initiations only take place when the Moon is new. The journey must be within the period of 14 days when the Moon is waxing. For the Moon receives human souls at death, and human souls come from the Moon to Earth before reincarnating. Also, at full solar eclipse, the greater initiation takes place. And the ideal condition is a location of initiation on the surface on the Earth within the path that the shadow of the moon travels over the surface of the earth. Then something about the role of the teacher. During the initiation, the teachers of the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion, called in Egypt the Hierophant or the Al-Omja, play an important supporting role to make initiation possible. The body is put into a trance, a state of paralysis, and the human soul is temporarily freed, and the body is guarded. And to a certain extent, the initiate is assisted by the teachers in his transitions to other realms, as far as his karma allows this. But the actual try itself is a test. What are the possible results of initiation? There are 3 possible results. First, success. Second, failure, and that means death because the connection with the higher self is severed. And 3 is partial failure, and that means psychic confusion as a result. And in case of failure, other lives are possible with new opportunities. We will now go to the characteristics of the 4 different main initiations. We will describe those characteristics from the point of view of the Teosofia, and also will mention how they are mentioned in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And I would like to build a small diagram with you so you can get an overview. In this diagram you will soon see the 2 left columns. Again, the composition of man, within the far left column spirit, soul and body, which you just saw in the picture of the egg scheme. And then the spiritual part with the 3 subparts, so the inner teacher, the inner Buddha and the inner God. You will see in the other rows and columns, in the horizontal rows, the phase of initiation, and then you will see how it is called in the Teosofia and the Egyptian expression for it. See, for example, in the lowest row you see the phase 1 to 3, the phase of preparation, of purification, the catharsis, as the Greek called it. And you see in the vertical columns the headings give information about the character of the initiation. We will now go to the first higher initiation, the 4th initiation as it is called. It is called the mystic birth. It is an initiation at the time of the winter solstice, around the 21st of December, and the duration is 3 days. And the test is about the letting go of the attachment to the lower material part of our composite nature, and to let go of the attachment to the material world. And it includes being able to consciously lay off the material body. So the ability to be mastered is detachment from the material world. The result in the Teosofia is called epiphany. The initiate is briefly shined upon or illuminated by a god. The Egyptians called this the realization of Osiris Typhon. Next week we will further go into the details how the Egyptians looked at this initiation, especially the one of Osiris Typhon. The fifth initiation is at the time of the spring equinox, around the 21st of March, and the duration is 14 days. The test is about the mastering of the psychic and astral nature of the initiate. This includes the dealing with ignoble habits and thoughts from the past, and the ability to be mastered is full control of your conscience. The result in the Teosofia is called theophany, meeting one's own inner God face to face and becoming temporarily one with it. The Egyptians called this the realization of Osiris Lunas. The sixth initiation is called the Great Renunciation. It is at the time of the summer solstice, around the 21st of June, the longest day of the year, and the duration of the initiation is 14 days. The test is about the mastery of the pure use of all aspects of our thinking. And this includes the complete mastering of thinking of all 7 aspects. The awareness of unity, the use of intuition, insight, the use of intellect, the use of your desire aspect, vitality aspect, emotional aspect, and your material orientation. The ability to be mastered is your intuition. And the result in the Teosofia is called theonosty. The inner God temporarily breathes into the initiate. It is divine inspiration. The Egyptians called it the realization of Osiris Horus. Finally, the 7th initiation, which is at the time of the autumnal equinox, around the 21st of September. The duration is also 14 days, and the test is whether he can realize and become the spiritual divine aspect of his composite nature. He becomes his inner God, his inner Osiris. The ability to be mastered is inspiration. It is called in the Teosofia theopathy. The initiate tolerates the conscious entry of his own inner God. He becomes a living God. In rare cases, this lasts for the remainder of his life. In Egyptian tradition, this was called the realization of Osiris Ptah. So this is an overview in this scheme I made for you of the phases of initiation, and in the coming weeks we will try to recognize these 4 higher initiations in the various sections of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and we will try to identify why we think we see these different initiation phases reflected in certain sections of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. We have made a kind of infographic how you could look at this Book of the Dead and where exactly where we are. It's a kind of navigation, so to speak, because the initiate will be going to other planes of existence during the initiations. And I told you that the exact subdivisions of all those planes is hard to recognize in the texts of the Book of the Dead, but we are able at least to distinguish 2 main planes, and that is above or behind the physical world, the so-called astral world or astral planes, which is most of the time called in the Egyptian Book of the Dead Amenti. And this plane corresponds to the non-sustainable, perishable part in our human nature. So not the physical part, but the non-physical parts which are non-sustainable and perishable. And above and behind that are the spiritual planes that correspond to the sustainable and imperishable parts of the human nature. And I have plotted in this diagram of these three worlds the various positions, so to speak, of the four higher initiations. So you see the initiation of Osiris Typhon at the crossing of the physical world and the astral world. And then you see Osiris Lunus and Osiris Horus. And finally Osiris Ptah, which is taking place in the spiritual world. And we will guide you through this process in the coming 3 lectures to see what happens with the initiate when he is going through these different processes. And please remember that the process of each initiation is always more or less the same. He goes through these worlds of the astral world and he goes to the spiritual world, but the level in these different worlds is different for every initiation, although it is hard to distinguish in the text, but nevertheless the test that he is undergoing is obviously different when you read the text. So we will come to that next week in our lecture. I'm now going to summarize a few thoughts of this lecture, and that is, we have said that the approach that we are following is not really a completely polished type of lecture where everything is completely clear. No, there is too much uncertain in this Book of the Dead, and you have to study really details to understand what might be meant on that specific text. So that's why we see this as a study of the hypothesis that the knowledge about initiation from the Teosofia can partly still be well recognized in the text of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and we hope we can show you that next week. That the culture of ancient Egypt still has a number of basic ideas which correspond with the Teosofia. For instance, consciousness as a starting point, and the idea that all sentient beings have an eternal life. Man as a sevenfold composite being. The processes of transformation in man which are possible to awake the inner God, and the knowledge about the process of initiation in the higher initiation was known in the mystery schools of ancient Egypt. Well, this is the wrap-up of the lecture of tonight. We will now have again a break of some 3 minutes, and I hope to see you back after the break. Mariska, are there any questions?
Yes, there are. And there is one question that went to a wrong email address from the first part of your lecture.
Okay.
I'll start with that.
Yeah.
The question is, the relationship between brothers in mystical stories always seem to involve what I would think are lower characteristics, like jealousy, envy, and the act of murder.
Yeah.
Are the origin of these characteristics related to man's manifestation, or some occurrence at a higher level?
Well, we will go through that in detail next week, or next 2 weeks from now, in the second lecture. What I can say is that as soon as there is in the consciousness of man the awareness of higher aspects, so that there is awareness of one can choose for, let's say, egoism, or one can choose for a more compassionate approach in life, then there is always this stress what to choose. And that is in all these brothers' quarrel stories expressed, that as soon as you know what to do according to consciousness, to your conscience, that's the English word, then if you know what to do, what is right, then your lower nature might start to protest because you have built up your habits, and as soon as you want to do the right thing, there might be a resistance because you have always given energy to your lower nature. So that is the inner struggle that is actually the topic of all those stories. And we will see that next week, when we will, 2 weeks from now, when we will talk about the initiation of Osiris Typhon, where Typhon, which is another name for Set, which is the brother of Osiris, and you see that actually it is the higher principle which is having a quarrel with the lower principle, and the lower principle wants to take over the higher principle, and that is expressed by the murder of the brother, which is symbolized by the lower nature, which is a symbol for the lower nature, who wants to conquer his brother, the higher nature. And this tension between being directed to the lower part of your nature or your higher nature, this is the topic of all those brother fight stories.
Well, thank you. Yeah. That's a clear answer. I also had a question that's just after the second part of your lecture. And that question is, could the average person in ancient Egypt reach a state in which he or she would be suitable for initiation?
Well, I think, like in ancient Egypt and also now, I try to point out that the requirements to be fit and ready to go through those processes of initiation of the fourth grade is of such a high requirement that you have to be very disciplined. You have to be able to be you have actually to be already a very selfless person. So all the egoism has to be banished. You have to have a strong higher desire to become a teacher for other people by going through these processes and to stop your own evolution. So you have to have very high ideals, but also you have to be able to practice those in everyday life. So I think I can state that most of the people then, of the average ancient Egyptians, but also of the average man now in our culture, is not up to the level yet that he can say that he can fulfill those requirements already. Because it takes a lot of training and a lot of working on yourself to ennoble yourself to such a level that you can become, let's say, an initiate of the first degree, and then the second and the third, which are only trainings here in this life with this body under the guidance of a teacher. And then when you are so far that you can fulfill all those requirements, that you are this unselfish person, and that you only work for the good of mankind, and when you have completely ignored your own development, if you are so far, then you are getting close to fulfilling those requirements. So the answer on the question is, the average Egyptian in ancient Egypt was not ready for this process.
Thank you. And I heard you call teacher, and the next question involves a teacher. The question is, till what level of initiation does the teacher accompany the initiant?
Yeah. What I said about the catharsis, so the first 3 levels of initiation, which were here on this planet Earth, then the teacher is there to guide you and to be a teacher for you. For the higher initiations of the 4th level and higher, then the teacher can guide you to a certain point where you lay off the body, the physical body, and what the teacher does is he has trained you, he has given you instructions for the period after this laying off of the physical body, and the teacher guards the physical body while the initiant is away to the other planes of existence, the first time for 3 days, and he guards this body so that when the initiant comes back, he will, like a bird comes back on its nest, can come back in his own body and becomes a dvija, a twice born. And that is the main function of the teacher. So he does not take his hand in the astral world to guide him there, although there may be some directions. That is what you read, that depending on the karma of the initiate, there can be of some suggestive help, but actually when the initiate leaves his body, it is his own responsibility to really show who he is and what he can. And he has to go through this process alone.
Thanks. Next question.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on the topic of the moon serving as a portal or gateway after death and before incarnation?
Yeah. You can see that the initiations all have to start when the moon is new, and that means that if we have here the earth and here is the sun, that the moon should be in between the sun and the earth, because this is how when the soul leaves the body, this is the pathway from the soul to the moon and then to Venus, Mercury and the sun. And when this initiate comes back, his soul comes back, he's coming back in the last stage again via the moon, because as I told in very abstract terms, that parts of the constitution of man belong to those various planets. And I will now name these different aspects of the composition of man. The parts of the composite nature of man which belong to the sphere of the moon are the more psychical aspects, so the karma, the emotional and the desire aspects of our nature. So the what is called the model body, the Linga Sarira which is the astral model body, and the desire body, the kama rupa body, they belong to the sphere of the moon, the cyclical part of our nature. Then when the initiate goes to the sphere of Venus, it is the higher part of our thinking that is belonging to that, and the sphere of the moon, of the planet Mercury, is connected to the Buddhic principle, that is the enlightenment principle in our nature. And of course the divine part belongs to the sun, but this cyclical part is especially belonging to the sphere of the moon, and we will discuss this part some 4 weeks from now, when we talk about the initiation of the initiation of the spring equinox. It's called the Great Temptation, and there, in the sphere of the moon, the initiate has to prove that he has complete control of the cyclical part of his nature, and he has to show that in all conditions he can, in the correct way, follow his conscience, that he is always righteous in his decisions. And we will later see in the Book of the Dead that there is a whole list of, let's say, requirements or answers he has to give to the Egyptian gods, that he has not committed certain sins or taken wrong actions, and that is connected to thinking and acting according to his conscience. And that is actually all connected to what the sphere of the moon is about. And so when an incarnating soul comes back from the state of after death, or Devachan, rest period between 2 incarnations, it comes back via the sphere of the moon to pick up those garments which belong to the sphere of the moon.
Thanks. And during your explanation, another question arose, but partly I think you might have answered it. The question is, when the initiate reaches the sun, is it the lower part of the sun or the higher part of the sun?
Of the what? The sun?
The sun. Yeah.
The sun. It
Yeah.
is a part, well, it is of course, we are not speaking about the physical sun, we are speaking of the spiritual sun. So, yes, we would say it is the higher part of the sun, it is the spiritual, non-physical part of the sun in which he enters and in which he is in that sphere. Yeah.
Otherwise it would be pretty hot, I think.
Yeah, it will be pretty hot, yeah. But it will be the spiritual part. So it's meeting the sphere of the spiritual sun.
Another question. When does a person know that they are ready for initiation? And is that something that he can decide for himself?
Well, if he is up to the mark, so to speak, I think that's the expression in English, when he fulfills all those requirements of being let's say, a very compassionate person that has done everything, has worked for incarnations long to contribute to the needs of mankind on this globe and all the other sentient beings, when his whole focus, his motivation is focused on helping others to grow in their consciousness, and when he has disciplined himself, then he will get gradually more and more, his conscience will be more continuously on and active, but not only that, he will he will even go higher. His intuition will become stronger and stronger, so he will be able to recognize truth directly without interference of his intellect. He will be able to recognize truth immediately, and so he will become actually, he will have a continuous flow from his inner teacher, what is truth and what is not true. And when that is the case, when he has, let's say, a continuous contact with his inner teacher of that level, that his intuition is continuously working, then also his outer teacher will come to him. He doesn't have to search. This outer teacher will come to him, because when he is ready inside, the teacher, his outside teacher, will know that he's ready, and he will come to him to meet him. And that is how the process works.
So you don't have to doubt if...
No. Just work on yourself and work for the world, and then the rest will follow.
Thank you. And then we go to our last question.
Yeah.
When you talked about that scheme of different initiations, you said the duration of the higher initiations processes, you gave it some days, 3 days, 14 days.
Yeah.
Where does this come from? And is it maybe half a moon cycle?
Yeah. Well, that's the answer. For the higher initiations, that's a very intuitive answer by the person who asked the question. Yeah. So he or she has answered the question, him or herself. Yes. So every initiation starts with the new moon, and a cycle of a moon is 28 days more or less. So because the initiate has to come back with the right, let's say, electromagnetic currents and the forces of nature behind him, he has to do it within, before the moon starts to wane. Mm-hmm. So it has to be done during the waxing period of 14 days, from the new moon to the full moon. And then, so that is why it is a 14-day cycle, half of a full cycle.
But the 3 days in the fourth initiation,
that is only for the fourth initiation. That is a very short cycle of only 3 days, so it is not the full half moon cycle. And that is only, let's say, the first, that is the mystic birth, which only takes 3 days, and that is actually to see whether the initiate is able to lay off his body and go through the first trials of the first higher fourth initiation. And that lasts only 3 days. And that is exactly the time that you see also during our Christmas, which is actually the mystic birth initiation. When we have Christmas Eve till when we have the 21st of around 21st of December and Christmas Eve, that is 3 days after that, when actually the initiate is, when he's successful, is reborn as a newborn God, that the divine part in himself has been awakened successfully. And that is the real date of his birth as a new person, as I said in the first part of this lecture, because then he has awakened the imperishable part in himself as a conscious power in himself. So he has awakened something in his composite nature that makes that he has become actually immortal. He has awakened an immortal part in himself, which is then a conscious power in himself. But it needs to further grow in order to be able to use it to actually master his incarnations.
Thank you. And in the meanwhile, another question came in. The Book of the Doors is a complement to the Book of the Dead, or is it its conclusion? And it's about the Wallace Budget books.
The book of what?
Sorry, there's a part before it, I'm sorry. The question is, I have a version of the Book of the Dead by Wallace Budget. Is it suitable? And then a question afterwards, the Book of the Doors is a complement to the Book of the Dead, or is it its conclusion? But I don't know whether you...
Well, now we come in a little bit in the details of the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead is composed of different sections. So you have the Book of the Gates, the Book of the Pylons, and that are all parts of what the Egyptologists call the Book of the Dead. So there are different sections. It is actually, they have collected all kinds of things which have landed into these papyruses. And they have different names, but they are now considered as sections of the Book of the Dead. And so I think that the Book of the Doors is one of these. It is called most of the time the Book of the Gates, the Book of the Pylons. That's the English names for it. And maybe we're talking about the same. I'm not sure about it, so I don't know exactly how to answer. I think that this Book of Doors may be part of the Book of the Dead, but I'm not sure.
Well, Joop, those were the questions for today.
Well, thank you very much for your question, and also for answering sometimes yourself, because that means that you have your own vision already, or have understood quickly what I have been telling. So that's nice. If there are more questions coming up, coming period, then please let them know. As you know, this series of English language lectures is a combination of lectures on one Sunday night, and then the next Sunday night we have a study connected to this lecture, because we can imagine that that there is more you would like to know about it. We have collected a little bit literature reading material which is of interest, also containing some of the things I have told you tonight, but it contains also some more ideas. And if you are interested to follow the study next week Sunday, same time, then you are very much welcome to do so, and you have to fill out a form on our website to give your email address, so we know you want to participate. The topic is the lecture of today, and we have some a little bit text which you can study in advance. And so if you like to join, please subscribe yourself on our website, and you will hear from us within a day or so. And we will see you then next week for the study on this topic, and 2 weeks from now we will have the second lecture, and we'll also followed by a study. So thank you so much for your question and your attention for this lecture, and we will now close our meeting of tonight by going to the Gayatri, as you know. The Gayatri, which is an appeal to our higher nature, and it reads as follows. O thou golden sun of most excellent splendor, illumine our hearts and fill our minds so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity, which is the heart of the universe, may see the pathway before our feet and tread it to those distant goals of perfection, stimulated by thine own radiant light.